All right, welcome back for another week of the weekly recap show for high school football and tri-state football. I'm Jacob Berkemeier and my co-host
Daniel Kuhn. How's it going?
So we had a fun week, I think, this last week in high school football.
If we're talking about just high school football, it was a fun week. I did not have a good weekend on the college or pro side of things as a fan, but it was a good weekend. It was a good weekend as a writer and as a spectator at the high school level. This week, we had some good games, and we're going to talk a lot about them tonight. Try to keep it under 46 minutes this time, so we're not taking up people's time too much on their Monday night. But if you don't have anything else, Jacob, to add, I think we can just roll right into.
Yeah, I'm good with rolling into
right into some of the games from this past weekend. I'll kick it off this weekend. I was actually in attendance for the Princeton and Lakota East game at Lakota East High School, and it was there's an old saying that Jim Ross, the wrestling announcer, used to have, and it was a slobber knocker was what he always used to say. And I think that's the best way to describe this football game. It was, from the very start, a very back and forth defensive battle. And the reason why it was defensive, or the reason why I say that, you're going to see the clip here of the game-winning field goal, and we'll get to that in a minute. But overall, from the very start of this game, the Lakota East team and John Kitna and his boys, they controlled this football game. They outgained them on offense by, I think, a solid 150 yards, if not more. I think 10 more first downs on the night. I don't have the box score right up in front of my face.
I'm about to pull it up.
Yeah, but it was a very largely leaning towards Lakota East on the offensive side of the ball. And they controlled this game early in the first half by 10 points, 10-0. And they kind of rolled into the back half of the second quarter, and they were in a spot where they could go into halftime with a 2-score lead, or at least a 10-point lead, double-digit lead. And Lakota East punter, he was number 33. He muffed a snap. And here comes Princeton rolling down the barrel, blocks the punt, picks it up, touchdown Princeton, and all of a sudden we got ourselves a football game. Rolling into the second half, it actually was more of the same than with the first half. A lot of defensive success from Lakota East. They were really stifling the Princeton offense. D'Angelo Birch and his Viking boys were struggling on the offensive side of the ball. But the Lakota East offense couldn't come up with points. They would drive all the way down the field and then proceed to get a penalty or miss the field goal. And they would come out of these drives with no points. And I remember thinking to myself on the sidelines, it's eventually going to catch up to them because this Princeton team is too good to roll over and, lose, whatever it was at that point, 13-10. So heading into the very tail end of the fourth, Lakota East got a touchdown and then proceeded to miss the extra point, which didn't seem significant at the moment because they had taken the lead late in the game. Princeton got the ball back, and then in a very akin to what we saw yesterday in the Cincinnati Bengals game, Princeton was 4th and 20, long pass interference is called. Princeton calls the game. I think a 5-yard chip shot field goal to win the game.
Yeah, 19 yards.
Yeah.
So,
and for Lakota East, to have that win, that signature win for John Kitna, that close, right? That's got to be a hard loss to swallow. But at the same time, they can hang their hats on the fact that they went toe-to-toe with probably the big boys of the GMC right there. And it leads into, for Lakota East, they can look forward to ahead of their next matchup. And then even further than that, they've got a shot against West, the way they're playing football right now.
Yeah.
If they can just convert their offensive drives, that defense of theirs is good enough to win that football game.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bottom line of this game is If Lakota East just could finish on offense, then we'd be talking about something totally different. You want to go ahead, Jacob?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like too that similar to the Bengals, mental mistakes. You getting flagged a lot, especially down crunch time, fourth quarter. It's never going to bode well for you. So, and also special teams, man. I mean, special teams will win or lose you a game right there, and getting a muffing a punt and getting it blocked and for a touchdown, that's the spark it sounded like Princeton needed because before that, it sounds like they were very lethargic on the offensive end, couldn't really get a lot going. So you're right there if you're Lakota East. You're right there. I mean, Jamison Kitna had a great day. He threw for 250 and 2 touchdowns, had 36 passing attempts. So they were slinging it a lot.
He made some.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
He made some incredible throws. Like, I think me and you were talking to each other off on Friday night when I was at this game and you were off at your game. And I think I texted to you. I said the way he throws the ball and the way he goes through his possessions. I'm talking about Jamison Kitna, Lakota East quarterback, was so impressive. And he would make plays to bail them out of tough situations. And they'd get within the Princeton 30-yard line. But they couldn't convert, and that was pretty much the end of this. That was what cost them this game. I mean, yes, the missed PAT is the direct reason because they only lost by 1. That 1 point would have sent it to overtime. But Jacob, I'll say this: color me shocked. The John Kitna-led team is struggling with the same kind of stuff that the Cincinnati Bengals are. Man, that correlation there that's just a coincidence, I guess. So. Lakota East next week, I believe, plays Fairfield, if I'm not mistaken. And
yes,
then
they do.
Princeton has,
Mason.
That's right.
I got the schedule pulled up. Don't think I'm just a wizard.
Should be a pretty easily winnable game for Princeton. But I think Lakota East has got a favorable matchup as well against Fairfield.
Yeah.
And I will stop yapping about this game, and I'll turn it back over to my colleague, Jacob, who's going to talk about Beechwood and Simon Kenton.
Yeah, so we're heading across the river for this one. So kind of first thing I want to say for all of people who might be watching from Ohio and get very confused like I do when you see Indiana or Kentucky divisions. So Ohio, the divisions go D1 is your highest student body population, D2, D3, so on and so forth. So it's the opposite in Kentucky and Indiana. So Simon Kenton is a 6A team, which would be the equivalent of a Division I team in Ohio. And Beechwood is a Division IIA team in Kentucky, which is the Ohio equivalent to D5. So that's what makes this game really impressive for Beechwood, shows how solid of a squad they have. They're heading to Covcath this week for another game against a bigger school, getting them prepared for later in the season. But tell you one thing, Clay Hayden is a beast. I watched him last year when Beechwood put up 55 points against Simon Kenton. It was 55-50. Crazy game to watch. Tons of touchdowns, big plays. This year, it was a little bit more laid back, but you can see here, Beechwood, the run game was going to. But really, they had guys step up, and that's the cool thing about this team. They had Tyler Fryman last year was a true freshman, had 3 touchdowns in the game I watched, I believe. Fryman has an offer from Louisville for baseball. Not last week, the week prior, so week 3, week 3, he broke his collarbone. So he is out until playoff time is what their head coach said. So he's out till playoff time. And then Luke Erdman, a senior wide receiver and defensive back, also went down. So that gave some opportunities for some sophomores to step up. One of them was James Cusick, who was Hayden's favorite target that night. 8 catches, 134 yards, and a touchdown. Caleb Aerosmith caught a touchdown pass, and then junior Nathan Paps had a great day. He had an interception, big-time interception, and then also had a touchdown on the receiving end. So cool thing is with some of these Beechwood guys, they're playing both ways. In another one of the games I'm doing, Taylor, they have a lot of guys playing both ways too. So you see some cool things with these smaller schools and what these kids are able to do. I know for myself, I did not have the stamina to go both ways at all. So going both ways is a challenge, man.
I did when I was 8. Not so much. Not so much. Not now. Not even at 19, or not at 19. Not even at 17. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. So, and then just to kind of touch on Simon Kenton, they played well too. It was just Beechwood just made more plays when it mattered, and we're able to kind of control the ball, especially in the fourth quarter. Beechwood was slinging it. Like I said, Clay Hayden, 21 for 27, 304, and 4 touchdowns. And that's just another day at the office for him. He's doing that a lot. I think I have the Class 2A stats pulled up. Let me see if I can find them. A million tabs open. Okay, yes, here it is. So Clay Hayden in the Division 2A for Kentucky, his season stats right now, 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, averaging 256 yards passing a game, 67% completion percentage. So guy can definitely sling it. But to touch on Simon Kenton, Brady Lee was not going down without a fight. The quarterback for Simon Kenton had 115 rushing yards on 17 attempts. So he was willing them to get first downs when they needed it. And then also through 3 passing touchdowns, had that interception that Paps got, and then was 24 for 36 passing for 284 yards. And wide receiver Tyson Weaver for Simon Kenton was also fantastic. 7-11, he was always open. 9 catches, 140 yards, and a touchdown. So definitely was an exciting game to be at, watching Beechwood again for a second time, seeing some of the guys from last year. Clay Hayden just getting to 3rd and 4th reads, and that offense looks so comfortable and fluid throwing the ball. So definitely a team to watch in Kentucky for the rest of the year.
I will say one more thing about this game, and it is this. So if everybody doesn't know, before every week, we as a staff pick X amount of games for the week, just for fun, nothing super crazy, but it's more or less about bragging rights. And currently I'm last, like by a lot. And I've never been very good at picking games, no matter what it is. So it's not surprising that I'm last, but I will hear Simon Kenton in my nightmares and in my sleep for the rest of my life now, because I'm pretty sure Greg Shoemaker and Dan Claskins pick the games, and they put Simon Kenton in there every week to mess with me, because I think I picked Simon Kenton. I think I picked Simon Kenton every week up until this week. They lost every time. So I finally picked against them. You get what I'm saying? I feel like I keep
always picking the wrong one.
Yes. Yeah. Like I didn't pick them and they kept winning, and then I picked them this week and they lost. So I will be hearing Simon Kenton in my sleep the rest of my life. But that's neither here nor there. It just was a little funny tidbit of information. If anybody out there wants to see how bad I am at picking games, go to tristatefootball.com and look for the staff picks page. I'm quite bad at it. I'm pretty sure one of our colleagues didn't pick this week, and he still did better than me. So moving on to, I'll talk about my second game. And if no one knew, Moeller, who was ranked number 1 in the tri-state or city by Greg Shoemaker on Blitz 5 and tristatefootball.com, they lost, which I don't think anybody was expecting. I mean, I could have seen them losing a game this year. I mean, a lot of teams usually lose a game or don't go undefeated, but when you see them with a loss in the they have an L in that column, and you're like, man, who they lose to? And you see Mallard Creek, and you're like, what? They're from North Carolina, people. They're actually out of Charlotte, and looking them up, doing a little bit of quick research on them, because obviously I don't know anything about them. Pretty good football team. Seems like they have a solid offense and a pretty solid defense. They held one of the top-ranked teams in the country, according to maxpreps.com, to only 28 points. And that same team, I think, has scored 50 in every other contest. So Mallard Creek isn't a team that was to be, slept on, and they played on Saturday in Ironton, which, if you don't know where Ironton is, it's on the tri-state of Kentucky, West Virginia, and Ohio. It's by Huntington, West Virginia, and Ashland, Kentucky, in that area down there to the southeast. But Moeller doesn't have a home stadium, so they just play wherever the heck they can find someone for an opening. So they were playing at Ironton High School this week, and they lost. They lost 21-14 to Charlotte-based Mallard Creek. And you may be asking why. Why did the number one team in the city lose to a team from North Carolina? Well, I can tell you right now. Matt Ponitowski, is kind of the lifeblood of this Moeller offense and this Moeller team as a whole, right? When your quarterback, if you pull up the box score and you look at rushing, Matt Ponitowski had 5 attempts for minus 46 yards. So that kind of spells it out for you right there. If you're not protecting your quarterback and he's getting sacked that many times during the game, assuming that means he got sacked 5 times, that's not a recipe for success. And it seems that their high-powered throwing offense struggled against the Mallard Creek defense as well. Ponitowski went 172 on 41 attempts. He went 18 for 41 for 172, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, only averaging 4.2 yards a throw, and that's extremely low compared to Moeller's normal standards. They ended up losing. They still only lost in overtime. It's not like they got blown out here. They lost on a 21-yard pass from Mallard Creek's Curtis Clark. That's a mouthful to say right there.
Yeah.
To Evan Rambert. So they lost in overtime. But you know what I mean? When the best team on paper in our rankings, they've been rolling over everybody this year. They beat Princeton handily. And I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. In week 1, and they go out on Saturday in Ironton. No one's paying attention, and they lose. And we're going to get to a conversation we're going to have about Moeller and another one of our personal favorite teams on this podcast. But so Moeller ends up losing 21-14 to Mallard Creek. Not a great day for the Fighting Crusaders on offense. On defense, could have been better, could have been worse. When you only give up 21 points and you lose, it's the signs that you got outplayed in the defense or on the offensive side of the ball.
Definitely. I think really the big problem is just nobody knows Mallard Creek. So you look at that loss and you're like, wait, what? Who'd Moeller drop to? I don't know that team. So for comparison, your third game that you're doing, Elder St. Ed's, St. Ed's, even though they're not Cincinnati based, that they're bringing it every time you play St. Ed's or St. Ives, but then you get some of these teams from a different state, North Carolina.
Way out of the way, too.
And that's a great win for Mallard Creek, too. I can't even imagine the travel. That's a long ride for them up
7 hours.
They get the job done against a really good football team. A team that we are expecting to go far in the state finals run. So, got to tip your cap to Mallard Creek. I'll be curious. I'll have to pay attention to them as the year goes on.
I'll have to keep an eye on Charlotte area
because they beat Moeller. So you got to make sure that they kind of sustain the winning as the year goes on and see if that was a decent, not a bad loss, or if it is going to end up being.
If you're going to lose, if you're going to lose, you might as well lose to a team no one's ever heard of, because
for sure,
that's not based here. Obviously, if you lose to a D5 school in Cincinnati, that's not good. But if you lose to a team from another state, it was okay, well, maybe that team's just really good. But I will say one more thing, and then I'll kick it back over to Jacob for his next game. Mallard Creek is so unknown, the box score doesn't even have a logo. They're just Mallard Creek NC. Nothing else. That's it. Don't know what the heck their mascot is. No clue. Yeah. No logo whatsoever. So that pretty much sums that up. Anywho, I'll kick it back over to Jacob, and he'll talk about his second game.
Yeah, so for my second game, going to take a look at Taylor at Deer Park. So Taylor's off to a tremendous 3-1 start. They're 1-0 in their conference, and they're coached by David Dransman, which I want to give a shout out to Coach Dransman. He was my D coordinator at Oak Hills. Phenomenal guy. great coach, but better person. So love seeing what he's been able to do with Taylor's program. He's done a great job in the last few years turning it around. They have a 3-star wide receiver, Aaron McFarland, who was pretty dominant last year in his sophomore season. So he's a junior right now. So yeah, last year, 916 receiving yards, 16 total touchdowns, 117 rushing yards, and had 31 tackles on defense. So playing both ways for Yellow Jackets, their best player. And then running back Easton Shrimp was the big dog of the night with 3 touchdowns on only 10 carries. So pretty efficient. Almost a third of the carries ended in touchdowns.
Pretty good night.
Yeah, you got to love that. Shrimp also forced and recovered a fumble for the Yellow Jackets. They also had 14.5 tackles for a loss. So I know Coach Dransman was fired up about that after the game for sure. And then their quarterback, Charlie Kantz, went 10 for 15 for 204 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I mean, pretty good offensive day for Taylor for sure. And they forced 3 fumbles on the day. So creating some havoc on defense. And then Deer Park had a pretty solid day running the football. Honestly, they got almost their 200 yards. I think it was 197. The issue was the pass game was non-existent. Had about 50 passing yards, and then obviously you mix in some turnovers there. It's not a recipe for success, but Taylor definitely looking good, and that what's it? Let me make sure I get the conference name right real quick.
You're about to answer the question I had.
Yeah.
I didn't know where Taylor is. Are they in Dayton?
No. So Taylor is actually like it used to be like I don't know if you ever knew like Three Rivers and stuff, or ever heard of like Three Rivers Swim Club. So it's down.
Yeah, I know exactly where that is.
Yeah, so like Shady Lane, Wild Mike's, it's like that. Okay. That whole area is kind of Taylor. So Taylor butts up to Oak Hill's district line as well. So
I was an East Sider. So
yeah, so we got a little clash here. Yeah, I know Taylor. But so their conference, like Wyoming and Indian Hill and Taylor, they're all having a great start to the year. So that conference will be, Wyoming's always a powerhouse, but be curious how that conference will play out as the year goes on.
I was going to say, it sounded originally when you were talking about this game and looking at the scoreline and kind of hearing you talk about the stats, it was like, it struck me that it felt like Taylor definitely was like dominant in the trenches in this game when you started talking about tackles for loss and fumbles. But then you started talking about Deer Park actually ran the football good. It just sounds like this Taylor, the Yellow Jackets, right? I think I'm getting that right. Yeah. Okay. I recognize their logo in my head, not necessarily where the school is, but I do know the logo. Yeah. That's how I know what I know, folks. Logos, nothing else. But it sounds like a fantastic defensive performance for the Yellow Jackets. I mean, 50 yards passing, even if they had me back there throwing the ball, I think in the way football works these days, and the way the game is played, I could probably throw 50 yards. I'm not putting money on that, folks. I'm not trying that. No one wants to see me do that. So don't take my word for it. But I'm just talking, to make a point. And for did you say 14.5 tackles for loss? Is that the right number?
Yeah, 14.5.
That's pretty crazy.
And still Deer Park getting 200 rushing yards after getting tackled for loss 14.5 times too.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like that. Like Deer Park knows how to run block, but pass blocking's foreign to them. It'd be I don't know.
So I'm curious, especially because Taylor and Wyoming match up this week. So that should be a really good game this upcoming week. So
Wyoming took the Madeira.
Definitely got my eye on Taylor moving forward.
That'd be definitely a game worth keeping an eye on if you're interested out there.
So, but yeah, I'll kick it back over to you for your next game.
Okay, so we lost connection to my mouse. It is what it is. We'll just use my fingers. So we'll move on to my third and final game, and that would be another GCL South school. We talked about it in the first iteration of this broadcast, people. I am a GCL South junkie, my AFC North high school football. But I picked this game because St. Ed's, or I think Elder went to St. Ed's. But anytime one of the GCL South schools lines up, head to head with St. Ed's or St. I's from Cleveland, sometimes even Hoban gets thrown in there. A few other teams from out of state. Those are a pretty common foe. Hewer Heights Wayne was a big one back in my day. Always play tough against Hewer Heights Wayne. But St. Ed's is a constant. They play every GCL South school, I think almost every year. They may not play LaSalle. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look. But every time they come to town, or one of the GCL South schools goes up to Lakewood, it's always a tough matchup. And it once again was. I mean, the Elder Panthers went into this game undefeated. They're going up against this team, that's kind of unanimously viewed as number one in the state. A lot of people could make an argument that Moeller may be number one, but obviously, that was prior to Moeller losing to Mallard Creek. But St. Ed's and Moeller are typically, at least the beginning of this year, were viewed as number one and number two. If you kind of look at ranking sites and stuff like that, unanimously. And so Elder goes into this game, trying to make a statement. We can hang with Moeller, we can hang with St. X, we can hang with St. Ed's. And the final scoreline ended up being 24-17 in favor of St. Ed's. But then you look at the stats, and I'll just leave this number here, folks. The fact that Elder scored 17 points is actually quite impressive, because Elder's rushing average for the game was negative 1.9 yards. Not very often you hear negative 1.9, negative anything on anything average. So the St. Ed's defense got after the ball once again. They do it seems like that's their calling card. In terms of offensive, St. Ed's outgained Elder 339 yards to just 105. So you may be asking, where did the Elder points come from? One pass, 2 turnovers, 2 pick sixes, and 1 pass. That's it. They got 1 pass at the beginning of the game, and then they picked off Elder. I'm going to get that mixed up, Elder and St. Ed's, because they're basically the same thing in my head. They picked off St. Ed's twice, and that's where those points came from. If you look at it from a box score perspective, it's all St. Ed's all day. And the fact that Elder was able to keep it this close, and I know obviously you never want to lose, and there's no moral victories in football, but if you're taking it from a face level, I mean, even after getting outgained by 230 yards on offense, and you kept it within 1 score, is a mighty tall task against a team of that stature, and not something that Elder can look back on and have any man, we came out of that game worse off than we went into it. Yeah. Right? I don't know about injuries or anything like that, but you come out of that game and you go, you know what? We may have lost, but we kept it close with one of the best teams in the state, and we still only gained 105 yards. Like, we're going to have something for the rest of the city, when we get back into, GCL South play. So I think that's kind of always how those GCL South schools have kind of taken St. Ed's. Obviously, they want to win. But St. Ed's, I don't think there's ever been a year St. Ed's hasn't been good. Yeah, I'd have to go look, but it feels like they're so good every year. And these they come into the GCL South schools, go up there to play them, or they come down here to play GCL South schools, and they're always close. And I feel like it's almost a measuring stick. Like, you take a look at that St. Ed's scoreline, no matter who plays them, if it's Moeller or Ed's or Elder, kind of take a look at that scoreline. Like, okay, this team's going to be really, really competitive in the division this year. Because like we talked about last week, St. Ed's, has the style of play that they have is, akin to how Moeller, Ed's, and Elder play. I keep saying Ed's. X and Ed's and Ed's and Elder are too close in my head.
Yeah.
They sound the same when I'm talking to them. Anywho, bottom line is Elder did come up short. They dropped their first loss of the season. If you're going to drop your first loss of the season, you might as well do it to Lakewood St. Ed's. They're pretty darn good. And I will kick it back over to Jacob for his third and final game.
Yeah.
Unless you have something else to say about
it. I was going to contribute just a couple things.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. So just wanted to point out, you said Elder forced 2 turnovers with the interception. So I was looking at Derek Uran Jr. for Elder. He was the one. He had 7 tackles in the game, and then he had the interception return for a touchdown for 31 yards. Previous week against Springboro, he had 8 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. So he might be a name to watch for the Panthers, as their defense has obviously shown that they can hang and they're really tough. So, you just got to wonder if Elder can kind of, as the year goes on, get that offense brought up to speed a little bit and kind of match the level of play their defense has been playing with, because their defense has been lights out. I mean, I know St. Ed's is a great team too. You're keeping it. Defense kept them in the game there when you're getting negative 21 rushing yards. I mean, it's hard to control. Yeah, that was the total. So it's hard to control time of possession.
Oh, I didn't even see
21. It's hard to control. You're not controlling time of possession. You feel like you're never getting ahead of the chains either. So defense definitely kept them in that game. So I'm just see if the offense can kind of work its way up to the defensive level. But that's all I wanted to kind of touch on in that game.
I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself.
No, you're good, man.
I wanted to kick it back over to you. You make a great point. I didn't even see the negative 21 rushing yards. I just saw the negative rushing, average. And I'm like, oh gosh, that's And I think I didn't notice the negative in front of the 21. I think I saw it. I was like, oh, okay, 21 rushing yards. That makes sense. No, negative 21. Like they didn't have, I guess they didn't have a single rushing attempt go for any positive yards all day.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. Speaking of crazy, I'm going to kick it back to Jacob, and he's going to talk about.
Yeah, man. So Lawrenceburg. Talk about an offensive clinic. So I'm going, once I get it pulled up on my screen, so I'm just going to pull up this box score real quick so everyone else can see it along with me. Let me get the, okay, yes. So that is it. So we're looking at this. 5 fumbles were forced in this game. So you see here, Lawrenceburg had 3 quarterbacks all throw for a touchdown, 5 passing attempts, 3 passing touchdowns. 66 yards for one guy, 11 for the other, 44 for the third guy. I mean, and then look at this rushing line. Look at how many guys are getting carries here. You got freshmen, you got seniors, sophomores, everybody. 6 touchdowns on the ground by 6 different players. So talk about what a fun game to play in if you're on the Lawrenceburg football team. Everybody is getting love in this game. Everybody is getting touchdowns, touches. Maybe if you're a receiver, you're a little upset because you're only getting 5 passes thrown. So you better make the most of them count. Looks like these receivers did. But, yeah, man, it was an absolute beatdown on Greensburg. And, yeah, you can see here 10 tackles for a loss for Lawrenceburg. 5 sacks.
I certainly hope.
Absolute dominant performance from Lawrenceburg. I mean, I couldn't leave this one off when you just see 70 points get put up. It's interesting, and it's Indiana football, so I wanted to make sure we're getting full coverage here along the tri-state area. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen, but yeah. So also Lawrenceburg held Greensburg to 10 passing yards and 10 rushing yards for the day. So I'm not sure if we're going to see a bigger blowout than that game this year.
I certainly hope they had the running clock on. Dear Lord.
That's
like, that's one of the worst. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy that like, it feels like that had going. I wonder what it was like going to that game in person. Every play was like an 80-yard touchdown.
I don't even think it was that. I think because they really didn't have that many yards. So rushing yards for Lawrenceburg, they had 265, but then 121 passing yards. So they're not even eclipsing 400 400 total yards of offense, and they're putting up 70 points. So that's where it's like, I just think they just kept getting stops on defense and turnovers and getting short field position, and then you're scoring like that. So
maybe Greensburg doesn't have a punter.
I didn't. I don't know if they just abandoned that strategy or if it didn't. No, they punted 3 times. Jacoby Miller had 3 punts for an average of 37 per punt. But it just
3 times they're like, hey, we're down 40. We'll punt it this time.
Well, how hard does it have to be as a defense too when they're running? Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. They had 10 different rushers last night, or not last night, Friday night, excuse me. But yeah, 10 different rushers. So you're getting fresh guys coming in. Nobody had more than 5 carries. I mean, talking, this is like back in the Calipari platoon swap days, for UK, like just rotating all these guys in and out. So I just wanted to touch on that game because I just thought it was an absolute crazy. And then you do a little deep dive into the box score, and then you're like, wait, they didn't have 600 yards of offense or like 7 turnovers. It was just, I don't know how they did it. So it's impressive. Great win for Lawrenceburg, obviously. So I wanted to touch on that because that score was just so outlandish.
Touching on that for sure.
Yeah,
it's crazy. So I'll kick it back. Or I'm not kicking it to anybody. We're going to talk here for a second. So one of our colleagues brought up a great question. Since Moeller lost on Saturday, obviously they were top number 1 in the top 25. And we talked about it last week. Our colleague, the Shoe-Roo, Greg Shoemaker, puts out his top 25 every week with on tristatefootball.com and then on Blitz 5 on WLWT.com. And you can go check that out on either one of those websites. But the question was, should Anderson be number 1 now that Moeller lost because of Anderson's insane point differential?
So I think we should probably give our opinions that we gave. I can't speak for everybody else, and the rankings will be out tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
So we have no control over these rankings,
right?
But yeah, so I'll go first. I guess I felt that Moeller should still keep the 1 spot, or it not necessarily be given to Anderson just based off of their strength of schedule. Like I felt like last year watching Anderson all year too. They have a lot of guys returning. I just feel like they're head and shoulders above a lot of the other teams that have been playing in the ECC. And we're kind of just waiting on this Witten Woods Anderson matchup. And that's not happening until week 9. So for me, it's a little tough to evaluate them completely when they're just steamrolling every team. I don't know if they're really that good, if they're just going to do that to every team they play. And that would be an amazing season. But I'm just I'm not completely sold on them because I haven't seen the
product.
Just a really good matchup for them. Like if I go to their schedule, South Oldham, not really familiar with them at all.
Neither am I,
honest. But I know West Claremont. So West Claremont is 1-2 in the conference play right now. They smacked them 52-7. Little Miami, they beat 64-0, which Little Miami's 1-3 right now. And then they also beat Lebanon 41-7, and Lebanon is 1-2 in the conference, 2-2 overall. So,
yeah, my argument was, if we're just solely basing on the body of work right now across the tri-state, I think they have a rightful claim to the number 1 spot just based on body of work. And obviously, strength of schedule is a big deal. Like that. West Claremont's played some pretty close games this year, but none of those other than that, none of those teams have really done much. Do you know what I mean? Outside of in the conference or even in general. And I'm not talking down on those teams whatsoever.
Absolutely.
But if you're taking, you're taking the body of work of like Moeller and you're looking at who they've beat. Obviously, they just lost to Mallard Creek, and we talked a little bit about Mallard Creek earlier. But they beat Princeton. They beat East Central. The East Central had lost a regular season game in like
22 games.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
something stupid.
And they went out and they handily beat them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you take on an out-of-state team. You come home, from Ironton with a loss, and that's going to look bad on paper. But I mean, on paper and in reality, Moeller is probably the far superiorly talented team. And
yeah, I mean, they have their test this week with St. X too.
Right.
I mean, St. X is top 5 in our rankings, so
always a big game.
Yeah, that's a huge game for them, and this is where I guess they can silence us. And
I'm not even saying that Moeller did anything wrong. It happens, I mean, I remember we talked about it last week. I went to Moeller. We went up to New Jersey and played St. John Bosco or whatever, and we got smoked. But it's just like actually, I think I'm getting that wrong. I think we were terrible, and we were getting smoked by the GCL South schools, but we beat St. John Bosco, who was like number 12 in the country, and we went up there and won. Of course, I was a bench warmer, so I didn't get to go, but I got left at home. But that's neither here nor there. But I'm not talking down on Moeller. It's just the conversation was should Anderson be number one, and I think we're both in agreement that if we're looking at just body of work, then they have a claim to it. But
I mean, they definitely have the craziest point differential out of any team right now, 157 points for, 14 points against.
But can you really put them over Moeller and St. X and Princeton? Do you know what I mean?
I'm in agreement. We're both in agreement with each other. I think we're both just trying to play the devil's advocate a little bit. So I'll be curious what the rankings come out as.
Yeah, we'll be curious to see check out what Greg has to say tomorrow. I think he prints it out in the morning. Sometime in the morning hours. So keep an eye out for that on our Twitter pages. And then on WLWT.com and tristatefootball.com. All right. I'm going to let Jacob kind of take it from here to the end. He's going to go over some of the standings and stuff like that. That's his area of expertise. I'll stop talking so we don't go over 48 minutes again.
You guys will be seeing a bunch of tabs on my screen.
I don't have much. Mine's not much better.
Okay. So we'll kick it off in the GCL South. So first, we didn't really touch on
LaSalle won again.
Yes, LaSalle with a barn burner win. We're talking a baseball score here, 7-6. They got the touchdown, and a good win for them. I mean, I know Louisville teams usually bring the juice a little bit, and they're usually. I know what's the one that always plays
Louisville St. X.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. I'm not as familiar with Louisville Central, but St. X putting the beat down on Withrow. Obviously, we talked about the other two games, but huge upcoming week for the GCL. So they got St. Xavier. Yeah, so Louisville St. Xavier is playing at Elder this week. That's funny that I mentioned that. I did not know that was happening. Moeller at St. X this week. That's game of the week. Huge game, obviously. And then LaSalle's playing Withrow. So we'll see if Withrow's going to just run into the GCL the 84 Bears defense that LaSalle right now. Or if they'll be all right. So
I respect Withrow for playing in the GCL South.
That's a tough. You're bouncing over to a tough conference right there. Back-to-back weeks in the GCL South. So not much going on in this yet. No conference play. So we'll skip over the
New Richmond
Buckeye Athletic.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, New Richmond's undefeated. Williamsburg looking good too. Wilmington 2-2, Batavia 3-1.
Yeah.
So then go to the GMC here. So as we talked about, that Princeton Lakota East game was a great game to be at, and huge win for Princeton to move to 3-0 in the conference. Middletown is the big surprise to me. I don't know what to think about Middletown right now. Like they're playing Lakota West this week, so we'll have a much better gauge on Middletown.
They're 3-0 in conference.
Yeah, and they have played Sycamore, Oak Hills, and Coleraine, which I do want to give a shout out to Oak Hills. 45-13 win over Coleraine. No, Max Soupy had a great game for Oak Hills. So, I mean, always good to see them win, hoping that they can kind of turn it around in conference play as it goes on.
It's crazy to see Coleraine 0-4. Like, just thinking about Coleraine in the past.
Bolden left, and it is just
been rough. Tough sledding.
It is rough. Yeah, it's very rough right now. So, not sure how long of a turnaround that'll take before they get back to the glory days. Mason and Hamilton, though, 7-3. So that's an exciting game right there. But in the GMC, definitely the game I got my eye on is Lakota West at Middletown. We talked about it earlier. Think Princeton and Lakota East should be able to handle the job against Fairfield and Mason. Just really curious to see if Middletown can hold their own against the big dogs, or if we'll kind of get a better gauge of how their team's looking for the year. And then moving to the ECC. So Anderson, Whitten Woods, cream of the crop here. I don't think that's going to change as we move on throughout these weeks until about week 9. And then that's going to be where we figure out who's probably going to win this conference. So Anderson gets a little bit better test this week, though. They're playing
Kings, right?
Kings, yeah, which Kings has a solid squad. So we'll see if Kings can give them, a pretty good shot here and see if they can maybe pull off an upset. Who knows? So, and Whitten Woods is playing Walnut. So Walnut's 0-3 right now. So Whitten Woods will probably shut him out, if I had to guess.
That's their MO these days.
Whitten Woods is coming off of a shutout, so it's not like I'm talking crazy here. They've allowed 8 points this year.
Yeah.
Through 4 games, 8 points.
That's still somehow better than Anderson.
Yeah. So I think that matchup down the road is gonna be great. But yeah, so then we're going to the GWAC. You got Springboro getting some redemption against Wayne this week. They lost to Elder the week prior, and definitely a big bounce back win. I think they lost like 30-6 against Elder last week. And
something like that. It was close.
Come back and beat Wayne. We talked about it last week. Not sure what happened to Wayne in the last few years, because when we went there, they were unreal.
They were always really good when we were in high school.
Yeah, so not a ton going on. Conference play just kicking off for them for the GWAC. So we'll see how it moves forward as the year progresses. Same with no conference play has kind of happened, but kind of just looking at the results here. You got Mount Healthy getting a win over Taft, Fenwick getting a win over Aiken.
Aiken messed me up last week on those picks, man. I picked them to beat Fenwick. I thought for sure I got that one right.
I think I picked Aiken too, so we're both in the gutter on that one. Cincinnati Country Day and Cincinnati College Prep, they hit the over this week. 92 points scored in that game. Harrison putting the beat down on West High. West High is out of their glory days by a long shot. But then finally, moving to the Cincinnati Hills League, which features one of the teams I was talking about earlier, Taylor, and Deer Park as well. But really, I think this has potential to be one of the most exciting conferences, actually.
Indian Hills 3-1.
Yeah, Indian Hill 3-1, Taylor 3-1, Wyoming 4-0, and like I said, Taylor and Wyoming play each other this week. So you're looking at Wyoming's a team that's constantly, I believe this is D4. Mm-hmm. I think Wyoming's Division 4, and so Wyoming's always going to state. Like they're always in that run towards the end of the year. So I'm just very curious if Taylor this week can, make some noise and knock them off here. So
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, Jacob.
No, you're good.
I'm just looking at that and I'm reading. Do I see that correctly? That unless their stats are just wrong, is Indian Hill not giving up a single point this year?
No. So you're looking at this stat is just the league stats, and then over here is
they haven't given up. They haven't given up
yet.
Oh, okay. I see what is going on now. They won that. That was their score.
Yeah, they won 48-0 against Marymount.
Just caught my eye there for a second.
Yeah. Like, oh my God, wait. So definitely should be an exciting finish, and just as this year goes on, what's going to happen with these three teams here, looking like clear. And Reading's also 1-0, so can't count Reading out either. But yeah, so that basically covers all of my conference standings for the Cincinnati area. Can't really ever find conference standings for Kentucky or Indiana. They do it a little bit differently over there. But so yeah, that's about all I have. I'll quit sharing my screen.
Good. So we've officially eclipsed last week. We're at 50 this week.
So we like to talk.
We've managed to get longer. Don't worry, we'll get it down. But I think we brought up a lot of good stuff tonight. Talked about some teams that we wanted to highlight. Kind of went over some of the good stuff and the good games from last week, and then we go into next weekend. Already touched base on it. Moeller St. X is coming up on Friday night. Obviously, a humongous rivalry. As a Moeller grad, I can say, from my own perspective, that I think it's the biggest. I'm probably biased, but I think it's the biggest rivalry in the city. These are two schools that don't like each other at all in the slightest, and they're both, top 5 in the city. And it's going to be for all the bragging rights. It's going to be for all the marbles, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that game plays out. And I'm going to kick it back over to Jacob if you have any other quick notes before we sign off.
Basically what I had talked about was I think the Taylor and Wyoming game will be a really great game this upcoming week. And then also Kings and Anderson's a game to keep your eye on. Just see if Anderson just keeps dominating. If it's another 55-7, win.
Then maybe we can put them at 1.
Then they'll keep making me eat my words of what I just said. Okay, so I'm very curious if they're going to get a better fight than they've kind of gotten these last few weeks. And I mean, Elder playing Louisville St. X too.
Yeah,
talk about a rough 2 weeks for them. Eds and then Louisville St. X. It's like the same with Withrow getting.
I was just saying rough too.
They're getting some tough matchups back-to-back weeks, but that's why those coaches do it, man. They schedule tough opponents, and it gets you ready come November, come late October, November, December, the time you want to be playing football. That's what those coaches are doing, getting their players prepared. So exciting week coming up, and I love doing the show. So we're week 2 is almost in the books.
We're done with we've come in at 53 minutes for week 2. Obviously the current trend would be over an hour next week, but we're gonna do our best to try to keep it shorter. But you know what? Hey, we like talking about football. We like talking about Cincinnati, Tri-State, Kentucky, Indiana. You know the drill. High school football, and we like bringing the information and stats and all that stuff to you, everybody out there. So well, thank you everyone for listening or watching, however you're consuming this media, again this week, and we will see you again next week on Monday night. Jacob, are we going live next week? Is that the plan? Are we doing live for the first time?
There is a possibility. I think that was the initial plan. We'll have to check with our colleagues Dan and Greg.
If
they give us a green light, it'll be interesting. We'll figure it out. You guys will just have to work with us a little bit. But the theory is that we would have this show going on, and it will push to our Instagram and other social media channels as a live feed that you guys can tune into there. Hopefully help us out with some viewership a little bit as well. But that's basically our plan. We'll see how it works next week if we choose to go that route. If not, we'll be on the pre-recorded route. So,
All right, everybody. That is
But
it.
yeah,
It's
always
everything.
a pleasure, Danny.
Yes, sir, man. We'll see everybody on next Monday night. Have a
Yes,
great rest
sir.
of your week.
Yep.